Hey guys, welcome back to the Another Excuse podcast. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is Sam Winsbury, the founder of Kurogo. Kurogo is a personal branding agency working with founders and CEOs to turn their offline authority into online impact. Sam built Kurogo from a freelance gig into a 15-person agency today, generating 30 to 50 inbound leads a month, predominantly from his own personal brand. He's been building his personal brand over the years to 50,000 people just on LinkedIn. And he launched his new podcast called Success Clues, where he interviews top operators and agency founders about what's actually working behind the scenes. We get into how he went from student side hustle to full-time founder, why personal branding is still underpriced, what most founders get wrong when building their personal brands, his views on pricing, hiring, growth, and positioning, and why the best operators usually don't call themselves that. This one's packed with honest, tactical insights, and I think you'll learn a lot from this one. Enjoy the show. Hey Sam, thanks for joining me today. I think this conversation can go in many different directions, so I'm excited to get into it. I think the best place to start is Kurogo. Can you tell us a bit about what it is and how it works?
Yeah, so Kurogo is a full service personal branding agency. So we work with founders and CEOs and we turn them into thought leaders using their personal brand. What that means practically is that we're brought into companies to work with founder, CEO, leadership team to basically take the amazing work that they're doing offline and portray it in the right way online to share their authority, share their expertise. Typically, clients come to us because they want to build their audience, build up their authority in the industry and sign new clients or raise investment off the back of it. So really it's a marketing tool, but it's one of the most powerful tools that you can have in 2025.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. And before we go any further, I just like to ask, how did you come up with the name? Is there like a story behind it?
Yeah, so do you know what? Originally we were called Brandly. It was the first name of the business when I set it up was Brandly. But we quickly concluded that that wasn't a very good name for the company. And we went through this whole process of rebranding the whole business. And part of that was coming up with a new name. And it was just through sheer research that I came across this concept called Kuroko, or Kurogo is the kind of English connotation, which is a Japanese term from Japanese theatre. And the Kurogo in Japanese theatre are like stagehands. So they're like moving all the props around the back of the set. They're basically doing everything around the main act to make the main act look good. But they wear all black or whatever the color of the back of the set is, so you can't see them. And that's kind of what we're like to our clients, doing everything behind the scenes to make them look good. But they're the main act, and we shouldn't really, like, people shouldn't really notice us.
Nice. That's a really cool name. Um,
Thank you.
and you started Kurogo like quite young. Why start a business over getting a normal job?
Yeah, I just fell into it, to be honest. I've always been quite entrepreneurial. Even at school, like when I was studying at school, I was writing blogs. I started my own blog around psychology because it wasn't a subject my school did, but I was interested in it. I started a few other projects, like mini businesses at college that didn't really take off, never really worked, but like gave me a bit of an insight into marketing, into how to start a business and whatnot. So I've always been very entrepreneurial, and then this was quite a natural transition out of uni because I was freelancing, I was doing the odd bit of consulting whilst I was at uni finishing my studies. And when I came out, I realized there was a bigger opportunity there, and it was kind of really the only path for me. I didn't, you know, from my late teens, I didn't really ever consider a 9 to 5, just wasn't really on the cards, wasn't something I wanted to do. I loved the idea of building something from nothing for yourself. Like that really excited me. So it was the only real option for me once I left uni.
Nice. Were there any fears behind that at all? Because I mean, if you're at uni, there's a lot of people speaking about like, their next job lined up or internships or things like that, and you're sort of backing yourself and diving right in.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I left uni in 2020, which obviously the world was in turmoil at that point. It was carnage. So it was a pretty difficult point in time anyway. And I remember I realized I'd had saved up from uni. I had about 6 months worth of rent because I moved out of my mum's place. I had about 6 months of rent saved up, and I knew I could afford 6 months just from what I had in my student loan. So I gave myself that like time period to make it work. I said to myself, if it doesn't work after 6 months, you have to go and get a job because you've got to be able to afford to live. But over those 6 months, the business grew pretty quickly, and I think actually by the end of it, I was taking on people part time to work with me.
Wow, that's really really cool. And what did your first offer look like, and how did you go about getting those first few clients?
Yeah, so I was doing little bits of consulting at uni, which was literally just like I would jump on a call and people would ask me questions, and that was it. But when I started like trying to build the agency a bit more consciously, it was ghostwriting. So I realized that founders and CEOs were really busy, and they didn't have the time or the skill set, to be honest, to write high quality content on LinkedIn, which is one of the best ways to build your personal brand, build authority, and become a thought leader. So I went out to business owners that I knew could get clients on LinkedIn, and I basically said that like they need to be posting on LinkedIn, but they don't have the time to. So I will do that for them. So the first offer was like, optimizing the profile, writing their content, handling all of the engagement on the account. And that's still a huge part of the work we do today, but it was really really simple at the start, which I think actually helped having something simple. I don't think overcomplicating it at the start is a very good idea. So I think the simplicity of it was quite appealing to people.
Yeah, definitely. And how does what you do and like your current offer look compared to when you first started?
Yeah. So as I said, it's still like that LinkedIn piece is still a big part of our work. I'd say probably 95% of our clients we create content for, or we help them with their LinkedIn content because it's such a good avenue. But the first thing we do now, before we do any work in terms of actually producing content, is what we call positioning. So we actually spend about a month or so helping them build a positioning strategy. What that looks like is basically identifying how they want to be seen, how they need to be seen, the kind of brand they want to build, the kind of reputation they want to have, who they want to be reaching, and creating a strategy that's going to allow us to do that. So we actually spend about a month doing that, researching their audience, getting really clear on that first, which is easily the most underappreciated part of building a personal brand. Like so many people skip positioning, and it's always the difference between the personal brands that, like, even if they don't have loads and loads of followers, are really profitable, and the ones that are never profitable, even if they have loads of followers. So that's the first thing. Amplification is the second thing, and producing LinkedIn content is part of that. But we'll also produce video content for people now as well. Sometimes we're booking people on podcasts, booking them in the media, and then the final part of our model is what we call conversion. And that's about building funnels or ecosystems that take their connections and turn them into clients quite organically and naturally.
Cool. And I'm sure like you kind of learned about this while sort of building your personal brand and learning how to build a proper funnel and all of that. And then you kind of add that to your service offering.
Yeah, pretty much everything we offer for clients is stuff that I have just done for myself, figured out it works, figured out how to do it, and then turned it into a service that we can provide.
And what's your, well, how has your perception on pricing sort of changed and evolved? I know as spoken to many founders over the years, and yeah, their first sort of, well, their original perception of pricing was very sort of black and white, and it's kind of evolved and nuanced, and there's different ways to sort of make money from people in different sort of income levels and all that type of stuff. So I'm just curious of what your view is and how you approach it now.
Yeah, so I think at the start, if you're just getting started, you got to remember you want to make it as easy as possible for people to say yes, because you need case studies, you need testimonials, you need proof. So actually, at the start, my advice would be like undercut everyone, charge really low, make it a really simple offer, or do it like a completely performance based to remove the risk for people, or just do it based on an hourly rate. Like keep it that simple, but the main thing is make it easy for people to say yes. And then as you grow, as you have more demand, you can start increasing the price slightly, quite a lot, to be fair. Like our price now is 10 times what it was when I was just starting. And a lot of people are thinking about how they can add an extra 50 quid to their price when they should be thinking about how they can add a zero to the end of it. So you definitely want to increase it over time as you get more demand and more proof. But then you can also bolt in things like, I guess, like combination of pricing models. So with some clients now, we charge a flat retainer plus a percentage of the revenue that we generate for them. If we're building their funnels, we'll take a cut of that. So you can get a lot more creative and basically pair up pricing models. But I wouldn't advise doing that at the start. That's something you want to do when you've got a lot of demand. You've got a lot of case studies already, and it matters less if people say no to us. Like right now, it matters less if people say no to us because we've got a big pipeline. At the start, you don't have that, and you just want to get the yeses in.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And when did you realize, or when was the inflection point when this went from like a freelance thing to, oh shit, I need to get people on board because this is growing faster than I expected?
Yeah, it was about 5 6 months into that period where I went all in on it, and I said to myself, you got 6 months here to make it work. I think within probably 4 or 5 months, I'd got up to about 10K a month, and I was struggling to then write all the content myself. So the first move I made was hiring a part-time content writer to come in and take some of the delivery off my hands. And it was just part-time at the start, which was very low risk. They were another student as well, so it was great for them. And at that point, I was like, okay, there's a lot of demand here. This is working. There's a way this could be quite big, and it grew pretty naturally from there. Like it was similar sort of model throughout. It was as we got more clients, hired a few more writers, then brought in account managers and whatnot. So yeah, very very natural. But I'd say probably 5 months into taking it seriously, when I was getting referrals, getting lots of clients through the door, making more money than I thought was possible, I was like, yeah, this there's something here.
Nice. And what drew you to the concept of personal branding? Because, like, well, from my memory of LinkedIn when I just finished university, like my friends weren't spending that much time on it. So, like, how did you come across LinkedIn, and then how did you realize there was an opportunity there?
How old are you? Are we similar sorts of age? I think you might be a bit older.
I think I'm a bit older. I'm 31.
Yeah, so you're a bit. I'm just about to turn 26 probably when this comes out. So you're a little bit older, but like, yeah, it was still the same for me. Like LinkedIn was a very weird thing for like a 19, 20 year old, 21-year-old guy to be using. So it was strange at the start. The way I fell into it is when I was trying to get these freelance marketing projects, I would like go to events. I would message business owners on Facebook. I'd send like videos via email to try and get any sort of freelance projects I could get. And I was constantly met with the same response, which is like, who are you? Like, who the hell are you? You're just this 19-year-old kid, which I get, right? I'd probably say the same now. So I went to LinkedIn because I was like, right, that's a really businessy place, most businessy place I knew. As a last resort, I thought I'll go to LinkedIn, and I actually saw people started posting content in the feed, which wasn't really like a typical thing to do. I started doing it myself, literally as I was learning things about marketing. I would share them on LinkedIn, and over time, a few weeks in, a few months in, I started to get a little bit of interest. People started engaging with it, and eventually, a few people were reaching out saying, I've seen you posting. Can you help me? And at that point, I was like, right, this is really interesting because by sharing my knowledge, sharing the skills, experience I've got, even though it wasn't loads at the time, by sharing that online, I can get people to trust me and come to me with their credit cards in hand, ready to work with me without me having to go and chase them, which was really powerful kind of shift in my mindset. And at that point, I was like, right, there's something here. Didn't really know it was personal branding at the time, but in due course, I've come to realize that personal branding nowadays is one of the best ways to reach, influence, and build trust with people that don't know you exist currently.
Yeah. And how beneficial has it been for you to grow your own personal brand?
I mean, I've built an entire business off the back of it. We get 30 to 50 leads any given month, the majority of which come through my personal brand and the team's personal brands on LinkedIn. I've built a network that I'll be able to rely on for the rest of my life. I've met amazing people, do cool podcasts like this, gone to some amazing places, been booked to speak around the world. And I will never struggle to get a job again in my life, which sounds like a really arrogant thing to say, but it's true because of the network and the reputation that I've been fortunate enough to build. So personal branding sounds cringe, but truly has changed my life and is kind of like an insurance policy for me now. It's kind of like career insurance. So
Yeah,
I know I'm going to be all right. Whatever happens in 5 10 years time, I know there's going to be opportunities there for me.
definitely. Yeah, that's awesome. And so it started out just you. And I'm curious, like, how big is Kurogo today?
So currently we're 15 people at the time of recording. We got up to I think we were about 19, 20 last year. We actually downsized a little bit. We're probably a bit overstaffed last year. We're 15 currently. Maybe by the time this goes out, it might be 16, 17. So still quite a small business. It's crazy to think that like there's 17 of us. Sometimes I sit on team calls and I'm like, how has this happened? This is crazy. But yeah, 15 of us at the moment.
Nice. And was that downsizing kind of due to the capabilities of AI at the moment and being able to be a bit leaner with the people that you have?
Yeah, somewhat. It was somewhat AI, somewhat, we just realized we were a bit bloated. Like we had more staff than we needed. We weren't at capacity with the team we had. And we had to, like, truthfully, we had to get really strict last year about what cost was essential because difficult market at the moment. People definitely buying less the last 2 years than the first 2 years when I was in business, like harder to get people over the line saying yes and signing on. So we just had to get pretty strict about like what are we actually using here? What is actually serving the business, and that meant decreasing some of our costs, decreasing the team size a little bit, and the revenue wise, I think we're actually up from where we were last year, which is really interesting. I think there's probably a lot of business out there that maybe are experiencing a similar thing without knowing. There's a lot of cost that you can probably cut if you refine some processes, maybe use AI in a few places. Um, I think I fell into the trap of just wanting the big team, like, and almost
Yeah,
searching that and using that as validation, using that as the metric of success. I've come to realize that it's it's not the best metric to follow.
yeah, definitely. And uh, you spoke about processes a bit there. How have you implemented processes when it comes to scaling? Like, was it kind of just shooting from the hip when you first started, and then you kind of sort of form these processes as you go?
Yeah, exactly. Just at the start, make it up as you go along completely. Realize where things are broken, where things aren't working, put a process in place. I've got COO, my COO Lewis has been handling that side of things for the last few years, and we've come a long way from where we were. Like we didn't build all the processes and then hire people. We kind of did the two together, which I actually think is a better way to do it. Sure, it's messy at some points, and the first few team members we hired didn't have an onboarding, for example. It was literally like, right, here are your clients, go. It was scrappy, but it doesn't make sense to build a process for something you don't need yet.
Yeah,
It's a big mistake I see in people that are just about to start building a team, or they're at like a few thousand a month and they're like, I need to systemize, I need to build processes. And it's like, no, you need clients. You need to go out and get some clients first, and get to a position where things are breaking. And then you build processes to fix the things that are breaking. So
yeah,
at the start, it was very much like grow, break things, build processes, grow, break things, build. And there's still some of that today because we can't always predict what processes we're going to need, but we're a lot more structured. We've got a lot of SOPs in place that basically run the business now.
nice. And how did you go about setting up those SOPs? Was it just as you said, as it developed, you just sort of building out this documentation, so when a role came on, they just knew exactly what to do and how to do it?
Yeah, so we're fortunate to be fair that some of the people we first hired who went through and joined the business without an onboarding, we worked with them to kind of say, look, we're hiring for the role you came on to do again. What do you wish you had? What do you wish you had when you joined? And that's how we've built our onboarding process, for example. And then we'll get feedback from people that go through it and we'll refine it and so on. For other things that, things outside of onboarding, sometimes we'll look at other agencies, like other agencies in different spaces, and look at how they're doing things. Speak to clients that are slightly further ahead than us and see how they do things, and you can kind of model your processes off the back of them and then tweak them to fit your business. So it's it's kind of like creating hypotheses, building a process around that, and then getting feedback on it, improving, and just repeating that process. We've got loads of processes now and SOPs now, but they're probably not finished. They're probably going to update over time, and it really is just a case of like putting people through them, getting feedback, and doing them again.
Yeah, there's one thing that you touched on there that I find quite interesting working in the personal branding space is that um, it's I feel like it's even more beneficial than some other service or like delivery work because you can learn from the founders while you're creating content for them. So and you're asking them questions kind of like selfishly, but at the same time, it will serve as content, great content that'll probably perform anyway. So you're kind of killing two birds with one stone there.
Yeah, it's the best part of the job, right? You probably have this as well. Like the people you speak to, it's amazing, and we've been very fortunate. Some of our clients are amazing and run agencies themselves. That's been a big plus. Like it's the same business model, so there's been a lot to learn from them. And I've it's kind of like having free mentors.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And is is your team remote, hybrid, in the office? And how did you come to whatever decision it is?
Yeah, we're completely remote actually. So we got team all over the world. We got people across Europe, some in South Africa, some in India. We've had people in the States before. So yeah, really global team. The reason for that is we just wanted the best talent wherever it was. And this, I mean, the first person I hired was a guy from Manchester that was studying in Durham, so northwest and northeast of London. I was in London at the time, or Oxford, so in the south. Wasn't really a problem, was never really a problem. I didn't want to confine myself to one specific location. My philosophy has always been we'll hire the best people wherever they are. So if the best person for the job is in South Africa, Canada, India, wherever it is, we'll hire them. And that works for us. We're not the type of business where we need to be in person all the time. I get the value of being in person. I'm not like completely against having people in the office. And there are some businesses where like they just need to be in the office. A lot of times I wish we had an office as well and we could get together and certain things would be solved a lot quicker. But then you confine yourself to one region. And if we had just hired in London, for example, for the whole time, not only would the wage bill probably be a load higher, but also the talent wouldn't be as good. So, you know,
Yeah,
my view has just been find the best people wherever they are and build processes and systems good enough that it doesn't really matter if you're not together.
that makes sense. But when it comes to culture or maintaining culture or building a culture, but it's all online, um, how do you go about doing that?
Mm. It's tough, It is tough, right? Because there's people in the team that I've never met in person, which is it's hard to like really build a relationship with them. Um, but it's kind of built by the people in the business itself. It's not like I kind of sit at my desk and go, right, this is the culture, this is the kind of vibe we're going to have. It just doesn't really work like that. I think we've been very fortunate to find people that have all bought into building the culture themselves. Um, and it's happened very, very naturally. We've never set like a kind of we've never set the kind of culture we want to have. It's just happened naturally, and we've hired people that happen to fit it, and it's worked quite well. We do have meets, so every 6 months we do a summer and a like Christmas meet. Not managed to get everyone in the team in the same place yet, but we get the majority of people in one place, which is good as well. And we'll spend like 2 3 days together, which is pretty important. When you're not seeing people for the rest of the year, having them all in one place is useful. But I wouldn't say we ever have like we've got values, right? We've got ways that we want to operate, but the culture is kind of set very naturally. And I think if you
Yeah,
hire talented, ambitious people and bring them together in a room, they're going to create a positive environment anyway.
definitely. And you mentioned there that like you're not sort of sitting at the top, sort of dictating culture. But I'm curious, how and where do you sort of fit into the business's operations today?
Yeah, my main role is commercial now, so I don't do too much of the actual delivery for clients. We've got a
Yeah,
team that do that far better than I do. Um, Lewis, my COO, handles all of the operations. We've got a team that manages the delivery team, but really my role is in commercial, so marketing and sales. We have a business development manager who handles the majority of sales, but I manage him and do some sales myself. Apart from that, for me, it's getting the brand and I guess my personal brand as well in front of as many of the right people as we possibly can. So that's producing content. I'm basically doubling down on my personal brand now, helping the rest of the team build their personal brands to get us in front of more people, going to events, running our own events, creating our own lead magnets, basically things that are going to help us get in front of new people and get them booking calls with us. That fits within my remit. I guess converting them from the calls as well is sort of within my remit. That's really where I spend 90% of my time. I'd say the final 10, maybe 10, 20% to be fair, is on developing the services. Like what's next for personal branding? Because there are, the personal branding industry is getting very, very competitive. I'm sure you've seen it as well. There's a lot more personal branding businesses nowadays than there were even 2 years ago. So we want to make sure we're always ahead of the curve. We're thinking about what's next. We're developing new services. So that's probably the final 20% of my time is thinking about what does that look like? What's the future of the industry?
Right, and that actually leads me to my next question. But without revealing any of your secrets, sort of where do you see the future of personal branding going, and how are you thinking about staying competitive?
Yeah, I think certainly in the short term, people are really focused on ROI from personal brand, which is interesting because I actually think people don't understand personal brand and the power of authority fully yet. For me, brand is it's like the invisible hand of brand, right? Like you can't see it all the time, but it's always working for you, psychologically proven to work. I don't think everyone really understands that yet. So a big focus for clients that are coming to us, and I'm sure for other agencies, is they want to see ROI from their personal
Hmm.
brands. So I think agencies need to have some way to tie themselves. If you're a personal brand agency, you've got to find a way to tie yourselves to ROI and prove that you're generating new business for clients. So that's a big thing. Content, I think, is starting to become commoditized. Everyone's starting to produce content. I mean, it's still a very small percentage of people that actually produce content, but it feels like everyone is starting to produce content and cotton on to the power of content. When it becomes more competitive, I think it will be less effective and it'll be harder to tell the actual experts from the people that are just basically copying or using AI to forge whole pieces of content, and it's just terrible. So I think there has to be some other way to establish authority. I reckon that will be things like podcasts and PR, which I think are going to come back into popularity. So, for example, appearing on other
Interesting.
people's podcasts, exactly like
Yeah.
this, appearing in the media, and then the other one is long form. So that might be running your own podcast, as you're doing here, or a YouTube channel, or writing newsletters, slightly longer form, because I think that requires a level of expertise beyond what you need for social media, where it's shorter form. And if you can create highly engaging, highly educational, long form content, for me, that's a massive way to differentiate yourself from everyone else in the industry. So I think the true experts will be starting to do more of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And um, I'm curious about sort of the growing pains of businesses, and I'm wondering what's still difficult for you guys at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, one big thing is there are more stakeholders in the business now. When it was me, there was me in the business and 5 or 6 clients. It's pretty
Yeah.
easy to keep everyone happy all the time, right? When you've then got 15 people and 30, 40 clients, there's a lot more stakeholders, a lot more heads to kind of keep account for and keep happy. Um, we've got 15 very talented people, well, 14 very talented people and me, and 14 of those people want to develop their careers. They want promotions. Obviously, can't promote 14 people in a 15-person company. So things like that are challenging. Like, how do you grow in a way that is sustainable, but also is going to provide opportunities for everyone in the organization, is going to keep everyone happy? The truth is, I don't know the answer to that yet. I don't know exactly which roles we are going to be hiring for throughout next year. That's quite hard to tell, right? You can't always predict that far in advance. So it's also giving the team clarity on that, right? Like they want to know the answers to these questions, even when the answers aren't always dead certain. Do you give an answer that might be 60% accurate, or there's a 60% chance of it happening, but then if it doesn't happen, they're like, you told me something and it hasn't happened? Do you just not tell them anything? Like, it's a very fine balance there to walk between sharing enough information that you're being transparent, you're sharing what's going on behind the scenes with everyone, but also you're not promising things you can't deliver on. So yeah, I'd say just managing stakeholders within the business, keeping everyone aligned and happy and content is probably the hardest thing and the biggest unknown for a business our size.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you have mentioned before that, well, you mentioned just now that LinkedIn has been a really good sort of inbound driver for you. Um, and I've noticed now that you're posting sort of across platforms pretty regularly. So, what's your process behind the scenes? How do you stay on top of all of that content?
Yeah, so I'm I'm leading my personal brand at the moment. I think I'll get to a stage fairly soon where I actually bring someone in to help with my personal brand, but I kind of like drive the strategy and dictate everything. And then I have a few agencies and people that will help me with like editing videos,
Yeah.
creating graphics and whatnot. So I'm kind of coming up with a lot of the ideas, distributing them to those people to package up in the right way and then share across social. I actually work with my team on my own LinkedIn. So I don't know how many people know this. This might be a first on the podcast. I'm actually a client of my own business. So I've some of my amazing team members are actually working on my personal brand at the moment, which is great because it streamlines things for me, gets better results, also allows me to kind of stress test our service. But yeah, I'm dictating the strategy across them, which is it comes quite naturally because I've done it for so long, but I say I've still got a lot to learn across other social channels. Not quite cracked Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, video channels too much just yet, but it's early days. So yeah, it's a combination of a lot of hard work from me and then a few extra pairs of hands that streamline things.
Yeah, because I mean, video content, although you could have a whole team behind the scenes helping you out, you've still got to sit down and hit record, um, and make sure like the script kind of sounds natural. Um, and then yeah, it's a lot of work to test too because you're dishing out that content regularly, trying to pay attention to what works, and you obviously want to be kind of involved with your personal brand. It's quite difficult to sort of just like set it and forget it. Everyone, it's a representation of you publicly, so you've got to kind of be involved with that.
It's spinning plates, right? Like there's just a lot of
Yeah,
plates to spin. I'm trying to do things efficiently, like YouTube videos, for example. I will script like 5 to 10 at a time, prepare 5 to 10, and then I'll record all 5 to 10 in one day, and then I'll brief them for edits, and then I know I'm sorted for a couple of months, and I
yeah.
can focus on something else. About to launch a podcast of my own, which you'll know is
Oh, nice.
it's not an easy project to run. Like
No,
it's kind of like another business in itself to run.
yeah,
So that's a lot of hard work. I did a similar thing there, like batch recorded the first 5 episodes um, that I'll then be distributing. So it's just about being efficient where you spend time not task switching too much and trying to do one piece of everything on the same day. It's like batch producing certain things, which I've found has helped massively.
yeah, definitely. Are you going to record them in person or
First five
online?
are in person. Yeah.
Nice.
Um, I'm torn because like I want to do as many in person as possible. I think the clips, like social content off the back of them, slightly better, but also the
Yeah,
like convenience of something like this allows you to get people worldwide. Like it would be hard for us to do this in person, right? Because we're in two different locations.
yeah,
So I'm torn between whether I'm going to continue in person or move to something like this and do it remote. So yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
What's your experience
I
been like
was
with remote?
so I it basically what you said there. I wanted to get like any guest I wanted on. Obviously, it's sort of like you've got to have the receipts to get certain people on, and you kind of like work your way towards certain guests that like are dream guests and stuff. But um, being able to just ask them to jump on a meets link and like have a conversation for an hour is way easier for a busy individual than driving to a location. But at the same time, you've got a large personal brand. And so it's also a question for them of like the reach that it's going to get and whether it's worth their time and things like that. So um, yeah, it is a balancing act. But I don't have as big of a personal brand as yours, and so I decided to do the less legwork, like easier for anyone to jump on to start. And now that I'm in Dubai, I'm going to get a few people here and do some in person episodes and slowly shift over and bounce between the two, because I don't want like I'm okay with that because if it continues going in the direction that I hope it is, then I'd still want to get someone big in like the US and have a conversation with them because I feel like the conversation is more important than having to do it in person. So yeah,
Sure. Okay, so mix it up. Yeah, that makes sense. I might have, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be traveling to record, so I might have to do some remote. But
yeah,
yeah,
and that's fair. And I also think like um, in a podcast episode, if you're recording for an hour, there's more than enough short clips to cover one or two sort of like these conversations. But if the
Mm,
conversation is with like a really heavy hitter, it's still going to get views and listens because that name sort of brings the listens, but you still have the like video content through the in-person episodes. That's my thinking. But I have been frustrated with the video content in these kind of episodes because it's not as good
mm.
as an in-person
What was the
episode.
motive for starting it?
Um, so there's two things. Well, three kind of. I had a few like business ideas over the years, and I kept doing nothing with them, and it kind of became a self identity issue where I'd meet up with friends 3 months later, and they'd be like, "So what's happening with X?" And I'd be like, "Shit, I haven't actually done anything with it." And then this podcast was one of those ideas, and it almost did the same sort of cycle and like fizzled out. And then I was just like fed up with myself, and I was like, "Screw it, I have to do this thing, just to start as scrappy as possible." And I also wanted to learn how to speak better. I felt like because I did some teaching in Hong Kong and I was like simplifying my English a lot and stuff. And then I felt like the vocabulary that I used to have was kind of fading and it was freaking me out. Like words on the tip of my tongue, but not coming to mind. And then I was like, well, it's a great way to just put in the reps and speak. And then I kind of combined the two and I was like, how do I learn in that process? And because I wanted to start businesses, I was like, why don't I speak to people who've done it and learn from them? I'm then also getting the episodes and the reps in, and it kind of just sort of went from there. But yeah, that's how it started.
Do you see it now as like more of a passion project that you can learn from, or is it also part of your personal brand strategy as well?
Um, I think it's going to become more of my personal brand strategy. I've got 75, 76 episodes. So it's a solid amount of episodes in the bank. And I want to make it more part of the strategy now, think more strategically about how I deliver the episodes. Like I'm going to go through a rebrand. I've already come up with a new name because I feel like another excuse frames me as a beginner, which I kind of was when I started the podcast. But um, I wanted to change the name so it frames me as like more of an equal to people discussing businesses rather than a beginner.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's a great personal brand strategy. Like right, like you said, like to because you can tap into other people's audiences and their
Yeah,
authority, and then you become seen like on a level with them. I think it's more people should be doing it. So I think you're on something.
thanks. Yeah, and I'm really excited for yours to come out. I know Shoaib Ahmed did. He's been on the podcast too, and he started his. But he also did it all in person. I think he decided to take the sort of season approach where he's done
Mm,
like 2 seasons now, which is also kind of easier to manage. And you go in podcast season. Um, but yeah, I just was heads down 52 episodes, one a week until I got to 52, and then kind of
love it.
reassessed. Um,
Love it.
so you touched on longer form and newsletters and or podcasting isn't really like that, but I was wondering like how important do you feel actually owning your audience is? Like if LinkedIn shut
Yeah.
down tomorrow, it's like panic for a lot of people.
That's it, right? A lot of people they just build on social, which is kind of like renting, right? You don't actually own that audience. The platform that you've built on owns it. So Meta, if you built on Facebook or you built on Instagram, Meta owns your audience. If you've built on LinkedIn, LinkedIn or Microsoft owns your audience, right? You don't actually own that. Whereas something like a newsletter, if you've got a list of emails, no matter what platform you've built it on, that list of emails is yours now. And you can have that and you can reach those people forever, right? You own that audience. So you're not subject to platform changes, algorithm changes, random bans. Like we've seen LinkedIn will just randomly ban certain people for things that are ridiculous. So you're not subject to those sorts of risks. Is it a huge risk for most people? I don't think so. But if you're taking your personal brand seriously, long term, I think you need to be thinking about how you can own your audience because LinkedIn is not going to be like it is now forever, right? It was the same with Instagram, right? There was a period early 2010s, maybe 2015, where organic reach was just insane. You could grow really, really quickly. It's much harder to grow now.
Yeah.
So I think everyone should be thinking about if they're really taking the personal brand seriously, how can they build an audience that they can own so that in 20 years it's still as valuable as it is today? Weirdly, I don't think people are going to stop opening emails. It's strange. I think if people were going to stop opening emails, we would have stopped probably by now. So I think
Yeah,
email's still going to be a huge thing in 10, 20 years. I don't see it going away. And that's probably the best way to do it. Get a newsletter list.
nice. Yeah, I agree. And to finish off, I've got a few sort of founder focused questions. And the first is, can you think of a moment that tested you the most as a founder?
I can think of many. um, Probably the biggest was this was back in, I can't remember if it was 2021, 2022. It was at the turn of the year. And we'd we'd just have one of our team had just left, handed in the notice. We were a team of like four at this point, so that's like a quarter of the team gone. And then shortly after, another one did the same. The way it happened wasn't entirely legal from their point of view. We were never interested in taking legal action because it wasn't worth it, but like very stressful from our point of view. And it was me and one other basically doing like four people's work over the Christmas period. It was just carnage, like pulling ridiculous hours just to get content to clients. Um, and then at the start of the new year, so as we turned into, I think it was 2022, um, loads of clients left in the first week, like had clearly reevaluated their budgets for the year, decided they didn't have budget for personal branding. We lost a lot of revenue in the first week of January. And I was just sat there thinking, this is a mess. And I was ready to pack it in. I was
Shit.
literally going, right, this is it. Well, we'll call it a day. But I'd already offered someone a job in the year before. So I'd offered them a job and they were starting on the 14th of January. And I was like, they've already left their job. They've handed in their notice. They've committed. I can't really like pull out now and let them down. So that kept me kind of going just to stick it out to try and make it work because I basically felt bad. That person now is Jake, who's our head of client services. He's been with us since and has been amazing at the business. I'd say he's a good friend of mine now. We've got a good relationship. So that was that's probably one of the hardest moments. Certainly at the time as well, when I'd not been through anything like that. I think if I went through a similar thing now, I would handle it much better because I've been through it and I know how to handle those sorts of things. And you kind of learn that there's always a solution. But at the time, because I'd never experienced anything like that, and my whole kind of entrepreneurial journey had been fairly plain sailing up until that point, it was a real tester. Um, Fortunately, I decided to keep going. So yeah, glad I'd offered that job before before everything happened.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great story. I'm glad, yeah, glad it all worked out. And I feel like self-perception and like moments like that can completely change or our mindsets and the way we approach situations. And I was wondering, have you had any sort of identity shifts that unlocked real growth for you in the business?
Yeah, so many. I mean, I think the reason why my previous business ventures or like projects before this one didn't work is because my identity was completely off. I didn't see myself as someone worthy of having a good business, or I didn't see myself as someone that could be an entrepreneur. I kind of accepted that like I was just a student, I was just this young guy, I was just giving it a
Hmm.
go. And whilst maybe that was true, it didn't serve me at all. I had to actually see myself as someone capable, someone worthy, because you always act in accordance with your beliefs about yourself. So if you believe let's say you believe you're the type of person that goes to the gym 7 times a week, you will act in accordance with that and you will go to the gym. But if you believe deep down that you're a lazy person and you give in to excuses, no matter what intentions you set about going to the gym and try and have these perfect habits, you're gonna like fail them. You're not gonna go, right? Because you don't truly believe you're that type of person. I had the same with basically being an entrepreneur. I didn't truly believe I could get a stranger on the internet to pay me to deliver a service for them. Didn't think I was worthy of that. So I had to work really, really hard on my identity in that kind of 6 month period when I was just launching the business and a few months before it. Worked really hard on my identity to see myself as somebody capable of doing this, someone worthy of doing this. Also on my mindset around money and like asking people for money, right? Because it's a really uncomfortable thing. Even if it's just a few £100 at the start, it's a really uncomfortable thing to say to someone, you need to like you're going to pay me for this.
Yeah.
So I had to work a lot on my mindset around money. Often we don't realize how deep rooted these beliefs about ourselves and our environment are, because they're literally embedded in your psychology from when you're a child, right? So there's so many things that you just don't really realize are holding you back that you've got to work on, and that was a massive, massive thing for me. I had one again. I think it was 18 months or so ago. I was sat down at dinner with a friend who also runs his own agency, pretty successful agency. He's a couple of years younger than me actually, and um, he said like, "What does like describe life in one word?" And my answer was challenging, which was really interesting because I was like, why do I see life as challenging? It was at a time when I was like going through a tough period in the business, but I was like, deep down, if you see life as challenging, you're going to look for challenges. You're going to see really small obstacles as big hurdles that you've got to get over. You're going to be impacted by those things so much more. So your response to that question will tell you a lot about kind of your mindset around it. So that was another big point where I was like, maybe I'm seeing things as much harder than they are because naturally I think life should be challenging. I think life has to be challenging. What if I just thought, life is full of opportunity or life is easy? The things would probably flow a lot more naturally. So it's not woo woo at all. It sounds quite woo. It's not at all. It's psychological. But yeah, those are two big moments for me that I had to really work on myself.
Yeah, it's not woo woo at all. I actually find this topic really interesting because, yeah, like what you, they call it, manifestation or law of attraction, all that stuff, but it's actually just what you're paying attention to. And if you're paying attention to something, you're focusing on that, then more of that is going to happen. It just, yeah, it makes sense. But a few, um, I've had similar experiences, particularly with my relationship with money and like the scarcity of money growing up, and like money doesn't grow on trees and all that language. So that took a lot of changing and getting familiar with it, and also, yeah, like asking people. And then also, I stopped drinking 5.5 years ago, and I've actually had conversations with people who are thinking about stopping drinking, and one of that like doom sort of cycles is you want to stop but you don't, and then you drink, and then you wake up on a Sunday morning hating yourself and saying, I'm never going to do it again. You start again, and then it becomes like you start hating yourself, and if you hate yourself, you can't really expect anyone else to sort of like get you out of that hole except you. So yeah, I really relate to that.
Yeah, it's the alcohol one is there's so many people. I think that's probably the most common example of it. And
Yeah.
I drink every now and then. Like I'm not a huge drinker. I'm not completely off it, but even I do. I typically do like the first 4 or 5 months of the year. I won't touch it, and it just like you feel so different, right? I bet after four
Yeah.
years you feel amazing. So
Yeah, like for me, the 3 month like milestone was the biggest noticeable change.
yeah.
um just like the mental clarity, and like, and my body didn't really agree with it ever. I kind of just forced myself because of social pressures and stuff. And then I got really sick from it, and I was like, okay, that's a sign that it's just not for me, so why force things?
I think it says a lot about a person as well. Like if you can do something like that, where you give out something that you're so conditioned to do for a long period of time, or even like going to the gym. For me, if someone's in good shape, it's it's like the ultimate form of self-respect, and it's a sign that they're the kind of person that sets good habits and sticks to them, and they're going to be the people that are consistent that you can rely on. So again, people think it's like vanity, but actually it's a big indicator of the type of person you are if you can stick to like a gym routine, or you can stick to like a good diet for a consistent period of time. Often they are the best people to work with in business.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Because once you make that deal to yourself, you normally keep those agreements with everyone else, and you keep your word. So yeah, I agree. And when you kind of zoom out a bit, what would you say you're building? What's like the big goal for Kurogo?
Yeah, I mean, with Kurogo specifically, was leading personal brand agency. Right, want to build undoubtedly the best personal brand agency in the world, um, which I don't think we're quite there unequivocally yet. I think a lot of people hold us in high regard, but for me, we're a little way off. I want to go a lot bigger and a lot better. Um, and I like life more generally. I will run this business until I'm not the best person to run it. I've always said that. Right now, I think I am the best person to run Kurogo specifically. My personal ambition is run it until I'm not the best person to. And then I basically am treating entrepreneurship as a tool for freedom, right? And businesses are basically assets that give you that freedom. That's ultimately why I build. I love building from nothing, as I said before. So it's kind of like I'm building an asset here for a bit of personal competition with myself, but also to basically create a lifestyle that's going to serve me and my family for the rest of my life.
Nice. And if you had to start again tomorrow, what would you do differently?
Lots of things. I would invest in growth earlier on. So one thing we did is we hired a lot of people just thinking, oh, we'll sign more clients. But then if clients slow down, you now got a big overhead of your wage bill, and suddenly you're making no money. You're making way less than you were when it was just you and it was less stress. But if you invest in growth sooner, that's like oxygen for your business. And there's nothing in your business that having a bigger pipeline of people ready and waiting to work with you won't at least help solve. And it's like an insurance policy again for the business itself. So I would invest in growth earlier on, and I would have hired to solve problems. Sometimes I think we hire to fit a an organizational structure rather than just to solve the problem that you have. I definitely fell into that, and it gives you costs that you don't need. In future, I would just hire to solve specific problems that we're facing at that time.
And do you mean like as a consultant or like a specific role for that? Can you give an example?
So, like, um, a lot of people they will hire managers are a great example. I believe that most managers in most businesses are a complete waste of time and money because they basically coordinate people that can't coordinate themselves. If you just hired people that could do the job and coordinate themselves, you wouldn't need those two roles, right? I think that's a common case where managers are brought in just because it fits an organizational structure, but actually it's not the core problem that you should be solving for. You're not actually hiring to solve the core problem. You're just like brushing over it, or you're hiring to fit the structure because that's what everyone else does. Like I think most of them are a complete waste of time and just give more cost for people. So middle
Yeah.
management, notoriously bad to hire.
Yeah, I agree. And before we end every conversation, I normally ask my guests if they have a question for me.
Yeah, you've done 72 episodes.
Well, I think it's 70. I think this will be episode 76.
Okay, 76 episodes. Very impressive, by the way.
Thanks.
What do you look for? Two-part questions. What do you look for in podcast guests? And out of the top, let's say, five guests that you've had, what are the traits that they all share?
So, what I look for in a guest is there's a few things. Something that I could learn from them because I feel like my best episodes are ones where I'm exploring my curiosity. If it's just sort of a box ticking exercise, I know the answers to all the questions I'm going to ask. I'm not really invested, and I feel like that doesn't resonate with listeners. And the second is they've done some element of thinking, like they like whether that's building a personal brand or they've written a book or they're high up running a business. They've delivered their thoughts in some way where I've come across them online and I know that they've distilled their ideas and thoughts and put them out publicly. I think that makes for a really good conversation, because also when I started out, there were sort of smaller guests that were impressive on paper but hadn't really done much in the public sphere. And so there was a bit of like rambling. It's kind of all over the place, and you're trying to sort of like keep them on path. Whereas someone like you've you come up with ideas, you distill them down to 300, 400 words every single day. I could ask you a question on any of those topics and you'd be able to give me like a concise but valuable answer. And I find those guests really, really great to have on. So yeah, that sort of goes into the second question you asked. Is that's like the trait of the top five guests? Well, the traits are like they make content in a nutshell in some way, shape, or form. So even if it is someone like Kurogo running their personal brand, they're still jumping on those calls or whatever you guys do your delivery process, and they're refining their thoughts. They're speaking about what they did day to day. And I think even if you aren't turning it into content yourself, if you're getting asked those questions, you're thinking about your day to day, you're seeing what content's been put out, and then you start noticing it in your day to day, and you may be sending ideas to your team as a voice note on WhatsApp, being like, "Oh, I just got off a call. This was kind of interesting." You start noticing content, and when you think that way, you deliver answers in a way better, concise manner.
Love it. Love it. I think back to some of the best people I've listened to as well on podcasts, like the best guests. And I think that's so it's the way they articulate ideas separates
Yeah,
them from everyone else. So yeah, I love that.
great. Thanks. Well, thanks for joining me today, Sam. I really enjoyed it. If people want to find out more about you and Kurogo, where can they do so?
Yeah, so best place is probably my LinkedIn profile. I'm Sam G Winsbury on there. I post free content every single day for you to learn more about personal branding. If you want to go a little bit deeper, check out my featured section because there's a few extra guides there that go a little bit deeper onto how to actually become a thought leader.
Great. Thanks, Sam. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.